Thank you all for coming on to the Zoom this evening on January 25th for the MDA New Delegate and Alternate Delegate Information Session. With this in the past, it's always been something good to meet new delegates and alternates. I know we've got a lot of returning delegates and alternates as well, and there will be something for everyone as part of this presentation for what I've got going on here tonight. And we'll break down a whole bunch of areas I want you to take a look at as we get ready for this year's House of Delegates. First, and I'm going to try and keep it closer. Michelle will watch, and if she's going to watch the chat for me as well. I'm going to say what to get done in 1 hour. We'll try and keep it under that hour and get you done and out well before 8 o'clock. But there will be time for questions. If you have a question, pop it in the chat. Michelle will watch that and ask me, or we'll get to those at the end as well and answer those. So we'll throw out some MDA acronyms. Talk about the MDA House of Delegates, the members, the roles, and the powers that the MDA House has. The roles of the delegates and alternates within the House, as we said above, what my role is, the Speaker of the House for Michigan Dental Association, the different committees that we have of the House of Delegates, and the manuals and documents specific to what our needs are for the House. And last, a little bit on parliamentary procedure, resolutions, and motions. Oh yeah, and how we vote. This is where some of the changes will occur. For those who were in the House last year, I plan on utilizing similar things for what we had last year with voting in the House. So let's get started. A few things here, and if we were in person, we might go through and have a little game show like Jeopardy, where I might throw out an acronym and you'll tell me who it is or what it is, but let's keep it simple here. First, House of Delegates, HOD. Yep, HOD, that's what we are, the House of Delegates. What we have for different ones, you'll see me, and I use these at times as the RC or the Reference Committee. We'll learn more about them a little bit later. The Board of Trustees, the BOT, the Executive Committee. Who's on that executive committee? So you'll see, and I'll just tell you what that, the Board of Trustees, the House of Delegates votes for electing the trustees, and the executive committee is made up of the immediate past president, the president-elect, the secretary treasurer, and the Speaker of the House. Also the editor as well. I don't want to have the editor send me a nasty note later, so yes, the editor as well. So let's jump in and we'll take a look at what the MDA House is. First, what's the composition of it? So as being elected as a delegate or alternate representing your district, you will be, if you are a voting member of this, which would be the delegates, is 102 voting members. So you have 100 elected by their component membership, as well as 2 student delegates, one from the ASDA chapter at U of M and at University of Detroit Mercy. Now, also in the House of Delegates, the non-voting members that we have that are typically seated when we are seated in person, as opposed to this year virtually. These are also all the members, officers and members of the MDA board are on there. They do not have a vote. The MDA past presidents, and I will change this. I apologize. I just realized it should say former presidents, not past. Past is bad. Former presidents as well. Any ADA council members and MDA committee chairs are all members of the House of Delegates without vote. But they are there and can make motions and do everything else. They just can't vote. Now, I will say, you see that last statement says, unless duly elected as delegates by their representative component societies. We do have some who are a council or former presidents or committee chairs who represent their components. They can vote it as well. They're voting as a voting member of their own component. So the role of our House of Delegates, and you can read through this with me, is to support and advance the profession of dentistry and oral health of the residents of the state of Michigan. Also, this group, the role is to establish and support the mission statement and bylaws of the association. As such, we focus on public policy, legislative advocacy, professional practice issues, and representing our members. So there are a number of powers that the House of Delegates has. It's going to go over 2 slides. You don't need to take notes. These are all in your House manual as well. So if you want to fall asleep at night, pick up the House manual and go through it. I'm just happy to let you see some of this here tonight. Most importantly, I see it as, for the powers of the House of Delegates, advising the Board of Trustees regarding any matter of importance to the association. This is where we look for the House to watch through the year, to bring anything forward to the Board of Trustees or to any board member, any trustee member. If you have a concern, let them know. I know right now that our board members, for all board members, are reaching out to components on a routine basis prior to our meetings that we have to see, is there any challenges or anything we can help with, or anything that's going well in your component so we can share it with others. Now, as you see in that second sentence, the board will act on all resolutions adopted by the House no later than the second board meeting following the House of Delegates meeting, which would be our one here in April. So typically that the board will act on all those resolutions by the summer board meeting, which falls in June. Because we do have a board meeting that always immediately follows the House of Delegates meeting. Usually starts a half hour afterwards. And we did the same thing last year too. The second power is amending the bylaws of the Michigan Dental Association. So the House is in charge of the bylaws for the association. Next, the standard of ethics, and can adopt and amend the standard of ethics and the code of professional conduct of the association. You're in control of your own agenda. I will present a recommended agenda. A House votes on that as well to make sure we're going to follow what you want to do. Act on any matter brought before it by a delegate or the board. So any matter that's brought by any delegate, delegation, or the board of trustees, those are resolutions we'll talk about. That's where you're going to act on voting for those or amending or doing whatever you see fit. There it is, originate and act on resolutions. The House of Delegates can bring resolutions and act on them and forward those to the board for action. That's what we're looking for. We need to have you all as that 50,000 foot view of what's going on from up above and seeing what's going on for what the board might be missing. Let's look at some more powers here. So you elect the officers of the association, you elect the members of the board, who we go through, and you also kind of develop your own rules. The House has its own rules, and that's part of the House manual that you can take a look at all of those rules and procedures that we have. Establish special committees of the House of Delegates, and we have had those here in the past years. And actually, one of the reasons our association was out in advance of others was because of a special committee formed by the House of Delegates regarding doing remote meetings. And that's why we've been on Zoom now for 3 years. And a lot of our committees are doing that as well. But that's all because of a special committee that was appointed by me on acting on from the House of Delegates request. Next, the House elects the delegates and alternate delegates to the American Dental Association, House of Delegates. The House can also remove any officer or trustee from office without cause at any meeting of the House with a three-fourths vote. Last here, I want to say, is electing the American Dental Association District 9 trustee, which was completed last year. Dr. Michelle Talat-Gorecki was elected last year, and she will begin her year of service this year. So let's jump in and talk about roles of delegates and alternates. Now that you've been elected, I always wanted to say, so you missed a meeting and you got elected alternate or a delegate. What do you need to do? So you need to go through and realize you're representing your component dental societies for what's going on locally and impacting dentistry, as well as what your component needs. These are where issues get brought forward to the board, whether during the House or any other time during the year. Realize that your role is not just for those 2 days of the House of Delegates. And I appreciate the large group that's on here tonight realizing that, but bringing stuff forward is always important. And those unique things, as we say right there, is what we need to know about at the board level, as well as the House. So communication is always the key, and letting us know. And one way you can do that as well, besides contacting a trustee, executive committee member, the MDA staff or MDA team, but also through the House of Delegates, you can do that. There you go. Communicate with the board as a delegate or as a delegation. We've had that where stuff has come forward from a specific delegation from a component. The role is serving in that, incur certain obligations for what you do. We do expect of you. Be informed on what's going on, confronting our profession and the MDA. As I keep saying, serve as a communicator between your constituency and your component and the MDA board. You know what? Attending your component dental meetings. I know there's one here where I'm at in Lakeland is on Wednesday night. That's the annual meeting they're having. But also you got to keep up on MDA communications. And I know you as delegates and alternates, you will get a lot of communications starting up right now and rolling through April 17th and 18th. So going through and paying attention to that. If you can invest a bit of time just to roll through and look at past actions, and you'll see more later on where you can find those. But the best way to find all that information is through the MDA website. Signing into that and going to the House of Delegates page, and you can find all that past information to look at too. So the term of a delegate or alternate is 1 administrative year. So from House meeting to House meeting. This is where when we ask for who will be serving, this is how I appoint committees, those terms. Does it really end? Yes, when you're no longer a delegate or an alternate, but most importantly, we just want you staying engaged and involved. You'll know that once your name is on that list, you will be receiving that information. It's your duty to go through and keep up with it. So attend and participate in all the House meetings held during annual session. In most years, we have that House of Delegates along with the annual session. This year, we've separated it out to the Saturday and Sunday prior to the annual session, whether it is virtual or in person. Again, here's what we've got. Study the background information provided in advance. You will receive this information digitally. You can pull those off the website. You will receive an email that has all that information, those resolutions. You'll be sent that out in advance. Participate in any discussions before, during, or even after the House when things come up with those. And this means amongst your component, informing them of what's coming up and seeing if there's any questions you need to get answers to before the meeting. And being strategic in where our organization is headed. You need to look forward and go, where are we going next? And take a look at that and see what you're voting on and what impact that will have is always important. As I say right here, working with your component dental society to submit recommendations to the House. We haven't seen this as much lately, and that's one thing I've tried to encourage last year. If you watched some of my talks last year, was if you've got an idea, bring it. Let's take a look and see whether you bring that recommendation to the House or bring it to the board or bring it to me. I'll help you work on anything. And I know we have a couple members on here who I've done that with over the past 3 years that I've been blessed enough to serve as your Speaker of the House. Oh yes, here's the fun stuff. As I said, looking at the House manual or reading the MDA bylaws, and as I said, manual of the House of Delegates. This is what this is what we use to go through and how we run our association. How we run the House of Delegates is all part of the manual. The bylaws is what we follow. If you haven't taken a look at those, open them up, go online, download it to your computer, and take a look through there. You can learn a lot about the history of our association as well as where we currently are. Here we go. Attend or participate in any scheduled component regional caucuses before the House meeting and on site. So on this year, the on-site will be virtually on the Sunday. And you'll see later, I've got some recommendations if you are with your component as well as with your region to go through and caucus ahead of time and ask questions ahead. So when you get to the meeting on April 17th, you've got questions to ask the reference committee or statements you want to make or get clarification prior. But you need to have these meetings ahead of time too. Don't just show up on Saturday, April 17th or on the 18th and then just want to start getting answers. Let's get these ahead of time and let's work on those. And you'll see some of the areas I've set up to help that out. Right here, as I say, honor the obligation to keep up with the speaker and the board communications on a regular basis. Go through and read through these. You got these emails. As I said, everything is fully accessible on our website for Michigan Dental Association under the governance page, and you can find those. If not, at the end, I know I have a feeling a number of you do have my email or my cell phone. You can always call me and ask me, and I'm more than happy to help. A text, just let me know. If you don't think we've talked before, just send me a note, but I'm happy to help you if you have any questions on that. Review what happened at the board meetings at the committee minutes. If you've got a question in regards to what the committee on membership had done, well, read up on that. And if you have a question, you can get a hold of the chair. You get a hold of one of the team members, from whichever committee that you're looking for, and with the board as well. Ask a board member, ask a trustee, find out what's going on that way. If you're not sure, if you need clarity or clarification on that. Here you go. Know who your MDA officers and trustees are and communicate ideas, suggestions, issues, and concerns. Again, you go to that governance page, you'll see everyone's bright and shining faces that are on there from the MDA officers and trustees and communicate. You can always click and send it that way. And it'll go through and they'll be emailed in that regard. Like I said, you've got mine. That's a starting point if you need me. But if you want to harass other people, please feel free to. They're here to serve as well. We're always happy to answer questions and listen to concerns. All right, so what in the world am I supposed to do? What's my role as the Speaker of the House of Delegates? So I conduct the meetings of the House of Delegates for what we have for those Saturday and Sundays this year. Responsible for presiding impartially over debate, ensuring that procedural rules are being followed. So this goes back to being nice. We will conduct ourselves in a good manner. We will be professional. We won't get personal, and we'll do these, as I said. We want to be nice to everybody, but we want to get our work done too. Not that those don't go together. Hey, there's what it was, proper decorum. So we're not going to be raising voices. We're not going to be making it personal. We are going to talk about the issues and we're not going to make other people the issues. It's proper decorum we will follow. If not, you'll be dealing with me and you don't want to do that. Maintaining order at all times. Yes. The virtual maintaining order is a little easier than sometimes in the in-person, as you can imagine, but more so we just want to be respectful of everyone's time and their perspectives. So I'll rule on points of order. These are more when we get into the parliamentary procedures as we need to. And most importantly for me, there's a lot of things that all these are important to me. This one, making sure that our votes are taken accurately, and then I announce those votes for what we have. So without question, we want to make sure that those votes are taken accurately, and then everyone understands what they're voting on beforehand, what the consequences are, and then as well afterwards, everyone knows what the actions that were taken based on the votes. I want to protect the rights of all members of our House, allowing that, following through with what we have with our following the American Institute of Parliamentarians, their standard code in regards to our parliamentary procedures we follow. As well, I make appointments to committees of the House of Delegates, and I am pleased to announce that we were able to get those all completed by last Thursday, had a week. I wanted to try and challenge myself this year, and I want to thank a number of people who are on this call, excuse me, for answering and saying yes when asked to serve on the committees for our House of Delegates. And we'll talk about more of those all here in a moment, not the people, but the committees. And as well, what I'm doing right now, providing training and information regarding parliamentary procedure and support to the House of Delegates. So one of my goals is to get out there and let you know what's going on ahead of time and answer any questions as we go. So the committees of the House of Delegates. First one we have here is the Committees on Credentials, Rules, and Order. This is 3 delegates. They go through and review with me the current House of Delegates manual to be adopted for the current year. So there's any changes, to this House of Delegates manual for the coming year, or even for that meeting, but usually we're looking going forward for the coming year with those. And also they determine and record the number of delegates present at each meeting to certify that a quorum is present. Now, as you can understand, when we're doing it virtually, we are counting this in a different manner. We will have our committee chair available for that to certify that a quorum is present. That will always, it takes place at the beginning of both days' meetings because we need to certify a quorum is present so that we have valid voting being taken place during that meeting. And last, little different here, but recommending to the House in case of a dispute over seating, assignment, or certification of a delegate or alternate. This is where if a change needs to occur, it's not usually a dispute. It's more so that if a delegate is not able to serve, that the alternate is taking their place, and that this group is the one that oversees to make sure that the credentials are appropriate and that the alternate can take the place of the delegate for the voting that occurs. When we're in person is different than when we're online for this, but we will get more of that information out because of how we need to set up the voting and how people are credentialed for the meeting here in April is a bit different just as last year. But this way, this group, it's easy for us to text or call them and say, we have this delegate alternate taking over for this delegate. And that's how this is a group that oversees that. Let's go to our next committee. Committee on Bylaws Language Review. This one this year is made up of 7 delegates or alternates. One thing you'll note with all of these, I really do pay special attention. I want to make sure we are representative of our entire association when it comes to your committees and the committees that I set up for our House of Delegates. I want to make sure we are looking regionally, you name it, I'm looking, and I want to make sure we get everyone involved. But for this one, they're going to receive and review in advance of annual session. So before our meeting, the language structure proposed amendments to the bylaws. So currently we have two resolutions that are bylaws resolutions that'll be before this group. I don't know. I don't anticipate that we'll have another one coming from the board for this. There is a potential, as always, that a component, if they chose to bring a bylaws resolution forward, could, and this group would be the one to review it. Because what this group does is they identify any potential conflicts with bylaws provisions from proposed amendments and make sure that the format is to make sure it's correct, to make sure it makes sense for what's going into the bylaws within that. This group works exclusively, besides along with myself, just as a resource. Michelle Nichols-Cruz, the governance manager, will be at that meeting. So the chair will go through and review those and make sure that they make sense. And if there's any changes that need to be updated or any other questions need to be answered, this group has oversight before that. Now realize that this committee is not empowered to prevent the adoption of any proposed amendment or resolution. They can't stand there and say, no, this one doesn't go. It just means, does the resolution make sense for where it needs to go? It is the crossing of the T's and dotting of the I's. Our last group that I want to tell you about that's one of our committees is the reference committee. This is the one that this reference committee will meet following the first meeting of the House. It'll meet in the afternoon on the Saturday. All resolutions coming before the House on Sunday go through this group. They will conduct an open hearing for the members of the association, members of the House, as well as for the association. We can allow them in. If we know ahead of time, we can let people come in and provide testimony. Once they go through and listen to the open hearing and hear from the testimony from the members, they go into a closed session, review those the hearing and what they believe is the will of the House. And what they do is they report their recommendations to the House on the second day. So they will go through and say yes, they recommend passing, or a no, or if they recommend any changes based on what was submitted to the House. And I typically will go through and talk more about this at the second meeting we have into March. Excuse me, we'll have that. Talk a little bit more about the reference committee as well. But this is one that with this group, I've served on these at the ADA level. It is an interesting time, and I've always enjoyed this part of it. One of the reasons I ended up really finding the passion that I have for parliamentary procedures as to how these committees work, especially this one in particular. So let's jump in next to the MDA manuals and documents for our House. So as I said before, we have the House of Delegates manual. These are all located online under the governance page, so you can download these. Now, the House of Delegates manual, this one reviews commonly used rules of order that a delegate or alternate may encounter and how they're applied in our House. So a number of the things you'll see a little bit later are directly from that House of Delegates manual. If you've served in a House before or served in any other group, there are some nuances that we're going to have, and we'll talk about those a little later, but the manual is a good place to start from with that. Once you get past the first few pages, then it talks about the parliamentary procedures and how we work through it. But I always look at, once you master the fundamentals, the basics, the delegate or alternate is able to participate in the functions of the House with truly a greater comfort level and effectiveness as to how you make things happen there. Our next one we have is the MDA bylaws. These define the name and the purpose of the MDA and how it should work. These are the governing documents for what we really have for how our association works. Bylaws are, they're the end all be all for what we look at. It's like the Constitution for what we're looking at here. They specify who members are, how the officers and committees are chosen, how and when they meet, and the rights and obligations they all have. These are permanent rules, so they shouldn't be changed lightly. So when we look at resolutions that you'll see before you, if it's a resolution, not a bylaws resolution, it passes with a majority vote. So 51%, with that would pass. But with these, it takes a 2/3 vote in order for these bylaws to pass. So that is an important reason that we'll look at when we look at our voting as well. But bylaws, like I said, permanent rules, so they shouldn't be changed lightly. So let's jump in a little bit here into parliamentary procedures for our House in regards to motions. So we use the procedures used to bring business before the House of Delegates and to process it to reach a decision in an orderly manner. And so it's accomplished through the presentation of motions. Now, motions, you'll see, is a formal proposal presented to the House for its consideration, deliberation, and a decision. Motions can request an action, express an opinion, seek support of an action taken by others, seek legislation, or establish a policy. That's the overall for a motion. So as we look at it, we talk about a motion. You'll hear me say the word motion, and we'll talk a little bit regarding this later, but main motions are used to bring up specific substantive item of business before an assembly, ours. A main motion can be debated, it can be amended or changed, it requires a majority vote to pass. It also can be reconsidered or rescinded at a future time as well. Now, when I say motion, really the top word, and I've used that word earlier, is a resolution. The resolution, the main motion, are presented to our House in the form of a motion to adopt a resolution. A resolution is simply a motion in written form. And so that's what you'll see as a list of resolutions. Now, one of the curious things that we use in our House and is based on our utilization of reference committee. the reference committee can present a resolution to a House that substitutes one for another. So we haven't had one of these in a couple years, but this is where if the reference committee hears testimony and says this is what we heard from testimony from the House, and they'll look and say we feel this is a better way to do it. They'll say they'll do it in lieu of, and so that is, it accounts for any amendments or changes people recommended, and they say this one will be adopted in lieu of these other things down below. And if we get to this point, I will explain this all to the House, but it's something that's more unique to ours. It's part of the AIP, or the American Institute of Parliamentarians, their standard code for parliamentary procedures. But this is one that I will make sure that will be, if we have one of those, when I come to your caucuses, I will let you know exactly how that will work. If we have one of those, I don't anticipate, but it's always available for the reference committee to use, and they will use it as needed with any advice that we have for that. So as I said here just a moment ago, we use the American Institute of Parliamentarian Standard Code as our parliamentary authority. For those who've worked under Robert's rules in the past, there are two main ones. There are a number of other ones as well. This is what ours uses, the AIP-SC. I should throw that acronym out, but that would be just for fun for some of those parliamentary geeks that are out there like me. If you've had experience with other ones, there are two things in particular that we don't use. So again, if you've used Robert's rules or one of the other types of parliamentary authorities in the past, these are noted in our House manual. First, seconding of motions. We do not require seconds in our House of Delegates. It slows the process down. If you figure in a group of 102, if a person makes a motion, makes a proper movement of a motion or an amendment, we'll talk about that. It doesn't require a second in ours because it'll slow everything down. And plus the recording of it as well is a challenge because somebody just yell out second. And so you figure what they say, 4 out of 5 dentists approve. Well, figure out of 102, we're going to get a few that'll say, sure, let's talk about it. The other part that we don't use, and this is a Roberts in particular, is tabling, for tabling a motion. What a table of a motion is when it comes to Roberts is you mean to kill it. And so we don't allow the motion to table, shall not be used in the House of Delegates as well. So those are two things that if you've worked in other groups, you might have seen those. We don't use those in our House of Delegates. Now, at our board level, we do have the seconds. We use seconds because it is a smaller group. We do not have the table though, even at the Board of Trustees. So let's talk about voting. That's what, there's a lot of stuff that gets done here for our House of Delegates. I want to talk about the voting. So we vote on the resolutions. Now, as I said before, most motions in our House require a majority to be adopted. However, as I said, there are some that require higher votes. And so the one that requires the higher votes is to amend your bylaws. So if there's a resolution to amend, it takes a 2/3. So the two we have before us, our action that will be before you for our April meeting, are both in regards to membership. Those will take a 2/3 vote in order to be carried through and passed. As I said earlier, to remove an officer or a trustee from office takes a 3/4 vote. But the 2/3 is the one we'll watch. And as always, I will let you know when there's a 2/3 vote coming so you understand that it is an important one for us as well. Not that they're not all important, but those bylaws ones carry that higher need for a higher vote percentage. Now, voting by general consent. This is more so when we're in person for how I look at it. But we'll talk a little bit what general consent is. I can, for our presiding officer, whether myself for our House of Delegates or if it is for the Board of Trustees where the president is the presiding officer, to save time when deciding routine or non-controversial matters. It means that all members in assembly are in agreement on a question so that no formal vote is taken. If it were in person and I could see everyone's faces, I would be looking out, and if we had somebody made an amendment and there's agree for what people have given testimony on it, I take it by general consent. And typically what I would say is if there's no objection, the proposed amendment stands approved, and I'll wait. And if anybody objects, then we'll go through. Obviously agreement is not unanimous, and then I will take a formal vote. It's harder for me to do that within a virtual format. So I anticipate that our voting for this House will all be on the keypad, or I'll be the digital voting that we'll be doing. Now, in most House of Delegates, we have 5 common ways: voice vote, showing of voting cards, electronic vote, standing count, and a written ballot. And at the end of each vote, the speaker will announce the outcome. But if you think about it, with 102 plus everyone else who's there, it's hard for me to do and have you all raise voting cards from home on your cameras so I can see them. The voice vote would take forever to go through to do that. The standing count, well, I want you to stand. We usually would be a standing count and have the tellers go through to count. Just want to make sure, you know, that's not going to happen. Or a written ballot. We can't go through and have it all sent in. So we're going to focus on the electronic vote that we'll be taking for our House of Delegates here that's meeting virtually in April. So on the electronic vote, I'm going to let the House know is the method to be utilized to capture your vote electronically. We'll be using Lumi is going to be attached. So it'll be the Lumi will be doing our voting with us. And as I learned last year, verify that all have had the opportunity to vote before I announce the outcome. Last year, while we were looking through the votes for those who were in the House, I was watching as the vote totals were coming up on my screen so I could see. I didn't know what the votes were. I just knew the totals. So I'd understand where we were in the votes, because I'm usually giving about the first vote, I'll give you a few extra seconds to get moving. But once I get to where we know the total number voting consistently, that'll move the House along as well. The results will be displayed on the screens in the House of Delegates, with the exception of our election outcomes. We do not project those on the screens. This is not the presidential election or anything else, or the gubernatorial election. This is our House of Delegates. For our election outcomes, we do not post those on the screens for you to see. But when it comes down to every other vote, we will post those, whether we're taking a vote on an amendment or a vote regarding a resolution. So I want to jump in here next to kind of run through what I see as the House of Delegates calendar for when we're in the meeting on Saturday, April 17th. That first meeting for the House will begin at 8:30 in the morning on the Saturday, going to approximately 10:30. We'll take a brief break to reset and bring all the trustee candidates into so they can give presentation. Typically that takes an hour. Those trustee candidates in years past, they will answer questions, typically 2. And this will be more determined here soon, and I'll be able to give you more clarity once the Election Commission is met here this coming Thursday. Following the trustee candidate forum, we'll do another reset, another quick break to allow the reference committee to be there to hear testimony. And I'm going to guess 12:30. Again, these are all kind of up in the air times right now, but Michelle Nichols-Cruz and I will be working on that. She does very well in timing out how these go. It's a guesstimate, but she usually nails it. And then last, because the reference committee, as you recall, they will hear testimony. Usually that will take an hour. Following that, they will go into their, they will sequester and go into a private chat to go through an executive session to review everything. And so we want to give them time, because last year what we did is at 3 o'clock, the trustee candidates rotated through via Zoom to the regional caucuses to meet with them, answer questions based on their what their answers were at the candidate forum, or answer any of the questions that the different caucuses have. And then probably following that as well, I'll do as I did last year. I didn't put it on this slide, but meet with a regional caucus representative and answer any questions and give them a heads up of any changes going into the next day's meeting. Then we get to the next day. So on Sunday in the morning, the component caucus meetings will meet. Last year, some started at 8:39. They wanted to figure out how much time they were going to need. Then our House of Delegates second meeting, I believe, will begin at 11 o'clock until close of business. Okay, folks, now here, excuse me, I kind of want to run through the different things coming up so you can see what's going on behind the scenes, or I guess this is now in front of the scenes for us. Starting this Thursday, the Election Commission is going to meet. And so as the chair of this one, the 3 of us will be going through and reviewing for any changes regarding the election process. And so this can be forwarded to all of those who are running for either elected position for a trustee or for the ADA and delegate or alternate positions as well. Now in mid-February, I'm anticipating we'll go through, as in years past, the Election Commission for last 3, I think this will be the 3rd year, has done videos for those running for the trustee officer or ADA delegation videos. So we have that, but it takes time to produce those. So probably looking at recording these in mid-February is what will occur. Late February to early March, releasing those candidate videos via the website. Of course, you'll receive an email letting you know when those are all available. Because if you can think about it, if you went through and looked at the delegate digest that came out here on Friday, you can see that list of individuals. And that's where the Election Commission will determine questions that will be asked during those as well for them to answer. So in late February, as I said, to early March, we have the release of those videos to the website and also the meeting of the Bylaws Language Review Committee. This will occur after the final, the board meeting that meets in February. And so that way, if there's any other bylaws resolutions coming to the House, they will meet to review those, as well as the two that are already standing. In mid-March, so following the early March, we'll have the Credentials, Rules, and Order Committee will meet with me to review, as I showed you earlier, what their expectations are. And then the Reference Committee, I'll meet with them along with Michelle to go through just so they understand what they can do or what they need to do in preparation for the House. Other dates, and these are all in the Delegate Digest, but if you want to take a picture, don't worry, I'm sure we'll have these out too. There is another MDA delegate orientation. This will get more into the weeds and all the fun stuff on parliamentary procedures. This will probably, it's going to take the place of what I had done in the past where we did it on the Wednesday night prior to the House of Delegates in-person meetings. But I want to give you some more things. I just spent 2 weekends ago, 3 days of parliamentary procedure, 24 hours over those 3 days, all Zoom, and learning how to better train virtually in regards to parliamentary procedures and how we can do different things, but just to make sure we got a good foothold so everyone's ready to go. March 29th, I have looked to put on a House of Delegates bylaws forum. So this will review the different bylaws resolutions coming before the House. So if there's any questions, there's a place to get answers or to hear more about it. And we'll be working more on that. April 6th is the LUMI training for the House of Delegates. LUMI is the platform that we'll be using. LUMI piggybacks on top of Zoom. So as opposed to what we had last year for those who served in the House, LUMI integrates along with Zoom. And so you'll be on one platform. We won't have to have a separate open website to go through to do the voting on. And for those who remember, that was our challenge last year. And so Michelle Nichols-Cruz, she really worked diligently to find an option for us because that was one of our challenges. And both she and I think everyone in the House saw the difficulties we had for a little bit. And we want to make it a better experience and not have the stress on anyone in the House, let alone the team who is behind the scenes working to get stuff taken care of. But the LUMI training I've got for April 6th, that will be recorded and available to House members as well. And then last, I'm going to strongly encourage you to take a look with your components now and your regional caucuses to have caucus meetings probably in the middle of March through the second week of March. I don't know if you want to try and do it that week before the House. If you come up with a resolution or an idea that gives you, kind of shortens the time there if you want to get something taken care of within to get help and get resources. But as I said, we're always here to help. But the sooner the better, always helps those out. And you never know, you might find another group that's interested too and wants to work with you on that resolution. So here is my contact information as well as Michelle's for that. It's always on the Delegate Digest that you can find on the website that you receive. Just text. If you've not texted me before, just tell me who you are and I'll put it in my phone. For everyone who is on one of the committees of the House, I've already got you on my phone, don't worry. And anyone who served before. So I've got a lengthy list, just like you all do as well. And there's for Michelle Nichols-Cruz with her phone there at the office and her email. And always happy to help as well as I am. And there we go. Let me stop my share here. I appreciate you all. I'm trying to watch that time frame. I know there was a lot of information. Be happy to answer any questions regarding anything you've heard so far tonight. And if there's more always to add, that we can add those in later. But just wondering if you have anything that you kind of got a quick question. Even a long question, not just a quick question. How's that? But here we go. You know what? I haven't seen the over-under. Yeah, now this is where I'll get the jokes from certain individuals. with that one. On the Super Bowl, you know what? Unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to go. Kansas City looks pretty darn tough. You know, I'm a Brady fan, even though I went to Michigan State. So, of course, I want it for Tom because he's closest in age to me. But I tell you, with the House for the coming year, though, for those who served in the House before, I really appreciate the feedback that you gave me at the end of last year for us to work on. Those are always challenges. Following every House, there is a survey that you will all receive to provide your opinion. And that's where it comes into what I do want to let you know. So one of the nuances that I didn't have in the presentation is that for those served last year, that if you were an alternate delegate, you weren't able to see the proceedings. And so because we were given, you figure we had 4 weeks to prepare for what we did as a House of Delegates. So utilizing the Lumi, we will be able to go through and set up. So we will have people be set up as delegate, alternate, at one of the MDA team. Actually, I know of right now, I have a number of guests that are coming in who are either speaker or component or ADA that are going to be coming in to join and observe us again to see how we do it. Last year we had 20, I want to say 22 or 25 people that were observing our house from outside because they knew they were going to be doing a virtual and they wanted to see how it worked or how it didn't work at times. But they wanted to have that opinion. So, but what I'm excited about with Lumi is that all of our members of our house will be able to watch it. The delegates will be doing the voting, but the alternates will get the experience by being on to see what goes on in the house. We're not able to change on the fly as we would in a normal house, but I want to make sure for those who have been elected as alternates that they are able to participate in the proceedings. Obviously, during the reference committee, they'll be able to, but during the meeting of the House, they can see what's going on in the House and not just be, we'll tell you about it later, message to them. That was important to us to find a way to make that happen, and Lumi's allowing us that opportunity. And the Lumi platform was used by the American Dental Association this year. They use their voting different, but I'm excited to see how our voting will be with using Lumi this year. So that was one part that I forgot to mention in the talk, but I want to make sure I let you know, because I see for those who are in the pictures in front of me, I see a number who were in the House last year. Okay. Michelle, I didn't see anything else in the chat except for a troublemaker, Lisa Christie. For those who don't know, yes, that is my sister. So I'm glad that she made that comment. Okay. So as I said, if you've got my number, if you have a question, reach out to me, reach out to any member of the trustees, the Board of Trustees. Michelle Nichols-Cruz and I are here to serve you with any answers. We can get back to you if there's things that come from your component. I just got a request today to come in and meet with a component at the end of March. So if you get to your component, this is to any of you. Give me a heads up if you want me to meet by Zoom. I don't know that I'll drive all around the state. But I'd be happy to jump on 15, 20 minutes to meet with a board or meet with a caucus ahead of time. I know I did that last year for a few, and hopefully can get some questions answered, because there are, it's different than meeting in person. And, but we've done this before. We're going to do it hopefully just one more time. And then in 2022, I want to see your smiling faces in front of me. But I really anticipate the work that we put in for doing this virtually. I want to make sure it's a strong experience for you and for our association and gets the job done. And I'll ask one more time, any questions tonight? And don't worry, you get a second crack at me, if not more. All right, terrific. I look forward to seeing you all here in March as well. Like I said, I'll delve more into the parliamentary stuff then. This is for more informational to get you going. And we will see you soon. Thank you to Michelle Cruz for putting up with me this evening and making sure everything ran on time. And we're getting you out of here early. Yes, I think thumbs up for Michelle, everyone. She's a terrific partner, and she's done a great job for us. So to all of you, stay warm, enjoy the snow. Hopefully we'll get some snow here in Michigan's great Southwest, and we'll see you soon. Thanks a lot for coming tonight.